Virgin forced to marry the ruthless MAFIA boss. He was her first time. Now he can't stop obsessing over her. Part 1. Part 1. The opening hook. Lucia Romano had approximately 14 seconds to decide whether she wanted to throw up on her wedding dress or pass out cold on the marble floor of St. Sebastian's Cathedral. She chose neither. Instead, she stood frozen at the altar, staring at the man she was about to marry, a man whose name alone made grown men pale, and whose reputation could fill entire police databases. Dante Salvatore. The Salvatore family's eldest son. Rumors called him El Diavolo behind closed doors, though never to his face, unless someone had a death wish. And here she was, 23 years old, wearing her grandmother's veil, about to become Mrs. Salvatore because her idiot father had gambled away their family's restaurant and owed this man's family $500,000. This is fine, she told herself, swallowing hard. This is totally, absolutely, completely fine. It was not fine. Dante stood beside her, impossibly tall in his custom black suit, his jaw carved from granite and his eyes, dark, unreadable, cold, fixed somewhere over her head. He hadn't looked at her once during the ceremony, not once. He'd said his vows in a voice like gravel and whiskey, barely audible, as if marrying her was about as interesting as filing taxes. The priest droned on about love and commitment, words that felt almost offensive given the circumstances. Lucia's hands trembled as she clutched her small bouquet of white roses. Her best friend Julia had picked them out yesterday while ugly crying into a bottle of Prosecco, lamenting how Lucia was sacrificing herself like some medieval princess. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest announced, his voice echoing through the cathedral's vaulted ceiling. Lucia's stomach dropped. "You may kiss the bride." "Oh God. Oh no. No, no, no." Dante finally looked at her. His eyes met hers, and something flickered in those dark depths. Something that made her breath catch. Then his gaze dropped to her lips, and Lucia forgot how to breathe entirely. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. His hand came up, and for one terrifying, confusing moment, she thought he might actually cup her face tenderly. Instead, he gripped her chin, firmly, possessively. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was acclaiming, hard, demanding, and far too thorough for a woman who'd never been kissed before yesterday when they'd had their practice kiss at the rehearsal, which had lasted exactly 1.5 seconds and left her more confused than a calculus exam. This was different. His mouth moved over hers with an expertise that made her knees weak, his other hand sliding to the small of her back and pulling her against him. The crowd, full of people she didn't know, dangerous people in expensive suits, erupted in polite applause. But Lucia barely heard it over the rushing in her ears. When Dante pulled back, his eyes had darkened to almost black. He stared at her like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. Lucia blinked up at him, dazed, her lips tingling. "Breathe, Mowgli," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. "Wife." Then he released her, turned sharply on his heel and strode down the aisle without waiting for her. Lucia stood there for 3 full seconds, her brain short-circuiting, before her cousin Nina hissed from the front pew, "Lucia, go." Right, she was supposed to follow him, because he was her husband now. She gathered her dress and hurried after him, her heels clicking frantically on the stone floor, trying to catch up to a man who clearly wanted to be anywhere but here. The receiving line was a blur of faces and forced smiles. Dante's family, his 3 brothers, his terrifying mother, who looked at Lucia up and down like she was evaluating livestock, various uncles and cousins who all had the same dangerous edge to them. "Congratulations," one of Dante's brothers said, with a smirk that suggested he found the entire situation hilarious. "Marco," she thought his name was. "Try not to break her on the first night, Fratello." Dante's jaw tightened. "Shut up, Marco. I'm just saying you look tense. Maybe you should." "Marco." The single word was a warning, low and lethal. Marco raised his hands in surrender, still grinning like an idiot. Lucia wanted to disappear, preferably into another dimension. The reception was held at the Salvatore estate, A sprawling mansion that looked like something out of a movie, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers, and more security than the Vatican. Lucia sat at the head table beside her new husband, who had spoken exactly 7 words to her since the ceremony. "Eat something. You look pale." She'd tried. The food probably tasted amazing. She couldn't tell because everything tasted like cardboard and panic. Dante, meanwhile, sat rigid in his chair, his hand wrapped around a tumbler of scotch, his attention on the various men who kept approaching to offer congratulations that sounded more like veiled threats and political maneuvering. This was her life now, this cold, terrifying world of power and violence, and a man who looked at her like she was an obligation, a debt repaid. When the dancing started, Lucia briefly hoped she might escape the traditional first dance. No such luck. Dante stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and extended his hand to her without a word. She took it because what choice did she have? He led her to the center of the ballroom floor, and suddenly every eye in the room was on them. The music started, something slow and classical that she didn't recognize, and Dante pulled her into his arms. His hand settled on her waist, large and warm even through the fabric of her dress. His other hand engulfed hers. "I don't really know how to," she started. "Follow my lead." He moved, and she stumbled slightly, stepping on his foot. Dante's jaw ticked. "Relax." "I'm trying," she whispered harshly. "This is all very relaxing, getting married to a stranger, dancing in front of a room full of criminals. Super chill." Was that the corner of his mouth twitching? No, impossible. Dante Salvatore didn't smile. "They're not all criminals," he said, his voice dry. "Oh really? What's the ratio?" 70-30. Lucia's eyes widened. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be comforting. It was meant to be honest. They turned, and this time she didn't step on him. Progress. "Why did you agree to this?" she asked suddenly, looking up at him. "You could have just, I don't know, taken the restaurant, or broken my father's legs. Isn't that what people like you do?" His eyes darkened. "People like me? You know what I mean." "I know exactly what you mean." His hand tightened slightly on her waist, and your father's legs were on the table. This was more efficient. "Efficient," she repeated flatly. "You married me for efficiency, among other reasons." "What other reasons?" He studied her face for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned down, his lips brushing her ear, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "You'll find out tonight, Mowgli." Lucia's heart stopped, then started again, racing double time. The song ended. Dante released her immediately and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the dance floor, her face burning, her hands shaking and her mind racing with what exactly tonight meant. Julia appeared at her elbow, gripping her arm. "Okay, you need to tell me everything. What did he say to you? You look like you're about to combust." "I think," Lucia said faintly, "I'm in serious trouble." Part 2. Character Foundation. The rest of the reception passed in a haze of champagne toasts. Lucia barely touched, forced smiles that made her jaw ache, and the constant, unnerving awareness of Dante's presence even when he wasn't looking at her, which was most of the time. He spent the evening moving through the crowd like a king surveying his kingdom, shaking hands, exchanging quiet words with dangerous-looking men, his expression never changing from that mask of cool indifference. But Lucia noticed things. The way his shoulders tensed when someone got too close to her. The way his eyes would flick to her location every few minutes, as if tracking her movements. The way his jaw tightened when one of his cousins asked her to dance. She declined. The last thing she needed was to accidentally offend someone and start a mob war at her own wedding. By 10 o'clock her feet were screaming in her heels, her face hurt from fake smiling, and the reality of what was coming. The wedding night sat in her stomach like a lead weight. She was a virgin, a 23-year-old virgin who'd spent most of her adult life working double shifts at her family's restaurant and taking care of her younger siblings. She'd had exactly 2 boyfriends, both of whom had lasted less than 3 months before getting scared off by her overprotective father and 4 older brothers. And now she was married to a man who looked like he could break someone in half with his bare hands and probably had. Deep breaths, Lucia. Deep breaths. You look like you're gonna pass out. Lucia jumped, turning to find Dante's youngest brother Nico, she thought, leaning against the wall beside her, a champagne flute in his hand and an amused expression on his face. Unlike Dante, Nico smiled easily. He was handsome in a boyish way, probably mid-20s, with the same dark Salvatore eyes, but without the lethal edge. I'm fine, she lied. You're definitely not fine. You're hiding behind a column at your own wedding. He gestured with his glass. That's not fine behavior. I'm not hiding. I'm taking a moment to contemplate your life choices. Despite everything, Lucia felt her lips twitch. Something like that. Nico laughed, a genuine warm sound that felt wildly out of place in this crowd. Look, I know this whole thing is insane. Arranged marriages, family obligations, all that archaic bullshit, but for what it's worth, he lowered his voice. Dante's not as bad as he seems. He seems like he wants to murder everyone in this room. Okay, fair. He does have that energy. Nico took a sip of champagne. But he's loyal, protective. Once you're his, you know. He'd burn down the world for the people he cares about. Lucia's throat tightened. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't even know me. Not yet. Nico's expression softened. Give him time. My brother's not great with emotions. Or words, or basic human interaction, really. But he's not heartless. Before Lucia could respond, a hand landed on Nico's shoulder, large, familiar, threatening. Stop harassing my wife, Dante said, his voice flat. Nico grinned up at his older brother, completely unintimidated. I'm being welcoming. You should try it sometime. Go away, Nico. So aggressive. This is why you don't have friends. Nico. The younger Salvatore raised his hands in surrender, winking at Lucia. Good luck, sister-in-law. You're gonna need it. Then he disappeared into the crowd, leaving her alone with her husband. Dante stared down at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. His tie was loosened slightly, the only sign that the evening had affected him at all. It's time to go, he said simply. Lucia's heart kicked into overdrive. Go where? Mavkoftisika. Home. The word sounded foreign. This morning. Home had been her cramped apartment, above the restaurant, where she shared a room with her sister and could hear her parents arguing through the thin walls. Now home was, what? Wherever Dante Salvatore lived. I need to say goodbye to my family, she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Something flickered in his eyes. 5 minutes. He walked away without another word, and Lucia released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She found her mother in the corner, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, surrounded by her aunts. When she saw Lucia approaching, she broke away, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Mia bambina, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Mama, don't. Lucia's own eyes burned. It's okay. I'm okay. He's a good man, her mother said, pulling back to cup Lucia's face. Rough around the edges, yes, but I asked around. He takes care of his people. He has honor. Lucia wanted to ask what kind of honor forced a woman into marriage to settle a debt, but she bit her tongue. This wasn't her mother's fault. It was her father's. The man currently avoiding her gaze from across the room, shame written all over his face. Her sister, 17-year-old Sophia, appeared next, hugging her tightly. If he's mean to you, I'll key his car, she whispered fiercely. Despite everything, Lucia laughed. Please don't key a mafia boss's car. I'd like you to live. I'm serious, Lou. You call me if you need anything. Anything. I will. I promise. Her brothers came next, all 4 of them, ranging from 19 to 28, each one looking like they wanted to start a fight, and knew they couldn't. They'd always been overprotective, sometimes obnoxiously so, but right now she'd never loved them more. We can still get you out of this, her oldest brother, Marco, muttered. Say the word. And go where? He'd find us? You know he would? Marco's jaw clenched. I hate this. I know. She squeezed his hand. But it's done. And maybe it won't be so bad. She didn't believe it, but she needed them to. When she finally pulled away from her family, she found Dante waiting by the entrance, his hands in his pockets, watching her with that same inscrutable expression. "Ready?" he asked, as she approached. "No, absolutely not. Not even a little bit." "Yes," she said. The car was a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, and a driver who looked like he could bench press a small building. Dante held the door open for her, the first gentlemanly thing he'd done all day, and she slid into the leather interior, her dress pooling around her. He got in beside her, and the driver pulled away from the estate without a word. Silence filled the car, thick, heavy silence that made Lucia want to scream. She stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. They were heading into the heart of Manhattan, toward the Upper East Side, where buildings cost more than most people made in a lifetime. "You did well tonight," Dante said suddenly. Lucia turned to look at him, surprised. "What?" "At the reception, meeting everyone. You handled it well." "Was that a compliment? From him?" "I smiled and nodded a lot," she said. "Not exactly rocket science. In this world, knowing when to smile and nod is a survival skill." His eyes met hers in the darkness of the car. "You're smarter than you look." "Gee, thanks. You really know how to sweet-talk a girl." Was that another almost smile? It was so brief she might have imagined it. "I don't do sweet talk," he said. "I've noticed. I do honesty, which is why I'm going to be clear with you now, before we get to the apartment." He shifted slightly, his body angling toward her, his presence suddenly overwhelming in the confined space. "This marriage is real, not in name only, not temporary, real. Do you understand?" Lucia's mouth went dry. "Yes. That means you're mine now, under my protection, part of my family." His voice dropped lower. "And it means I expect you in my bed, tonight, and every night after." Heat flooded her face. "I know how marriage works. Do you?" His gaze traveled over her face, lingering on her lips. "You're blushing like a virgin, Mowgli." "Oh God. Oh no. I'm not. I mean I am, but..." She took a breath, forcing herself to meet his eyes even though she wanted to melt into the car seat. I haven't." Understanding dawned in his expression, followed by something else, something dark and possessive that made her shiver. "You're untouched," he said, his voice rough. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. Dante's jaw clenched, his hand curled into a fist on his thigh. For a long moment, he just stared at her, and Lucia couldn't read the expression on his face, couldn't tell if he was angry or surprised or disappointed. Then he reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "I'll be careful with you," he murmured. "I promise." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. This was the first time all day he'd sounded like an actual person instead of a marble statue. "Okay," she whispered. His thumb traced her lower lip, and her breath hitched. "But I won't pretend I'm not going to enjoy ruining you for anyone else." And just like that, the moment shattered, and her face was on fire again. The car pulled up in front of a towering glass building that screamed money. The driver opened the door and Dante stepped out first, then offered his hand to help her. The lobby was all marble and modern art, with a doorman who greeted Dante by name and didn't even blink at the sight of a bride in a wedding dress. The private elevator required a key card. Of course it did. They rode up in silence, 42 floors according to the display. The penthouse, naturally. When the doors opened, they revealed an apartment that was less apartment and more architectural magazine spread. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights of Manhattan spreading out like a glittering blanket. The interior was all clean lines and expensive furniture, modern but somehow still warm. "This is home now," Dante said, shrugging out of his suit jacket and draping it over a chair. "I'll give you a full tour tomorrow. Tonight." He loosened his tie and Lucia's eyes tracked the movement involuntarily. "Tonight, you should know where the bedroom is." Right. The bedroom, where he was going to. "Breathe, Lucia. For the love of God, breathe. I should probably change, she managed, out of the dress. Your things were brought over earlier. Closets through there. He gestured to a hallway. Master bedroom is at the end. Our bedroom, she corrected without thinking. His eyes darkened. Yes, our bedroom. Lucia fled before she could embarrass herself further. The bedroom was enormous. A California king bed with charcoal gray sheets, more floor-to-ceiling windows, and a closet that was bigger than her old bedroom. Sure enough, her clothes were already hung up. Her shoes lined up neatly. Her toiletries arranged in the ensuite bathroom that had a shower big enough for 4 people, and a bathtub that looked like a small pool. This was insane. All of this was insane. She found a nightgown in one of the drawers, white silk, clearly expensive. Definitely not something she'd owned before. Someone, probably Dante's terrifying mother, had made sure she had appropriate things for her wedding night. Her hands shook as she unzipped her wedding dress, letting it pool at her feet. She stepped out of it carefully, hanging it up because even in her panic, her mother had raised her to respect expensive clothing. The nightgown slipped over her skin like water falling to mid-thigh. It was beautiful. It was also basically transparent. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her dark hair was falling out of its updo, her makeup slightly smudged from the long day, her eyes too wide. She looked young, scared. She looked exactly like what she was, a virgin about to spend the night with a dangerous man she'd known for less than a week. You can do this, she told herself firmly. You're a Romano. We don't break. We bend, but we don't break. With more courage than she felt, she opened the bathroom door and stepped back into the bedroom. Dante was already there, standing by the window, his shirt unbuttoned, his tie discarded. He'd been looking out at the city, but when she entered, his attention snapped to her. His eyes went dark, hungry. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and suddenly he was right there, towering over her, his presence overwhelming. Lucia, he said, her name rough in his voice. His hand came up, fingers threading through her hair, tilting her face up to his. Last chance, tell me to stop, and I will. She should tell him to stop. She should ask for more time, for them to get to know each other first, for anything other than this overwhelming intensity. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was "Don't stop." Dante's control snapped. He kissed her like he had at the altar, but deeper, hungrier, his mouth claiming hers with a possessiveness that made her knees weak. His other hand gripped her waist, pulling her flush against him, and she gasped at the feeling of his body, all hard muscle and heat, pressed against hers. Mine, he growled against her lips. Say it. Yours, she breathed, and meant it. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, carrying her to the bed, and Lucia's last coherent thought before he laid her down on those expensive sheets was that maybe, just maybe, this arranged marriage was about to get very, very complicated. Part 3. The inciting incident. Lucia woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the immediate disorienting realization that she was not in her own bed. She was in Dante Salvatore's bed, because she was Dante Salvatore's wife. Because last night had happened. Heat flooded her face as memories crashed over her, Dante's hands on her skin, his mouth trailing fire down her throat, the way he'd been simultaneously demanding and careful, taking her apart piece by piece until she'd forgotten her own name. He'd kept his promise. He'd been careful with her. He'd also been thorough, very, very thorough. And then, sometime in the early morning hours when she'd finally fallen asleep in his arms, she rolled over. The other side of the bed was empty, the sheets cool to the touch. Of course he'd left without waking her. What had she expected? Breakfast in bed and cuddles. This was a business arrangement, no matter how mind-blowing the consummation had been. Lucia sat up, wincing slightly at the unfamiliar soreness in her body, and pulled the sheet around herself. The bedroom looked different in daylight, still expensive and modern, but less intimidating. Her wedding dress still hung in the closet, a reminder of how drastically her life had changed in 24 hours. A note sat on the nightstand, written in sharp, masculine handwriting. Had business to handle. Coffee in the kitchen. Don't leave the apartment without security. Romantic. She showered in the ridiculously luxurious bathroom, trying not to think about how Dante had pushed her against these very tiles just hours ago, his hands everywhere, his voice rough in her ear, telling her exactly what he was going to do to her. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You're being ridiculous. It was just sex. Very good sex. Amazing sex. Life-altering sex. But still, just sex." She pulled on jeans and a soft sweater, her own clothes, thank God, and ventured out into the apartment. In daylight, the penthouse was even more impressive. The open-concept living area had sleek furniture in shades of gray and black, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than a car, and a kitchen that looked like something from a cooking show. The promised coffee sat in an expensive-looking machine, still warm. She poured herself a cup and wandered to the windows, looking out over Manhattan spread below her like a kingdom. "This is my life now," she thought, sipping the coffee. "I live in a penthouse. I'm married to a mafia boss. I had the most incredible night of my life with a man who left me a note about security protocols." Her phone buzzed. 17 messages in the family group chat. "Sophia, are you alive? Sophia, Lucia, answer your phone. Sophia, if you don't respond in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. Mama, Sophia, don't call the police on the mafia. Marco brother, Lou, seriously. Check in. Julia, wrong chat, but also yes, check in." Lucia smiled despite herself and typed a response. "Lucia, I'm fine, still alive. Apartment is nice." The responses came immediately. "Sophia, nice. That's all you're going to say?" "Julia, I need details. All of them. Every single one." "Mama, is he treating you well? Marco, did he hurt you? Be honest." Lucia's chest tightened. How did she explain that Dante had been... God, he'd been intense and possessive and demanding, but he'd also made sure she enjoyed every second of it, that he'd held her afterward, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin, and for a moment he'd seemed almost human. "Lucia, he didn't hurt me. I promise. I'll call later, okay?" She silenced her phone before the inevitable follow-up questions could come. The apartment was silent, too silent. Back home there was always noise, her siblings arguing, her mother cooking, the restaurant sounds filtering up through the floor. Here the only sound was the quiet hum of the city far below. She explored, because what else was she supposed to do? The apartment had 3 bedrooms. Why did one person need 3 bedrooms? An office with bookshelves full of leather-bound volumes, a gym that was better equipped than most commercial ones, and a wine cellar that made her jaw drop. In the office, she found evidence of Dante's life. Business documents she definitely shouldn't read, framed photos of his family, a shelf of books that surprised her. Not just business texts and Italian literature, but fiction, thrillers, some sci-fi, even a few classics. Dante Salvatore read for pleasure. Who knew? She was examining a first edition of The Count of Monte Cristo when a voice behind her said, "Find anything interesting?" Lucia jumped, spinning around to find Dante leaning against the door frame, his suit jacket gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked tired, and there was a bruise forming on his jaw that definitely hadn't been there last night. "What happened to your face?" she blurted. "Business meeting got heated." He pushed off the door frame and crossed to the desk, pulling open a drawer. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," she gestured to his jaw. "That doesn't look fine." "I've had worse." He pulled out a folder, his movements precise, controlled. "Did you eat?" "Not yet. She stopped. "Wait, are you changing the subject?" "Yes. You can't just show up with a bruised face and expect me not to ask questions." Dante looked at her then, really looked at her, and something flickered in his dark eyes. "I can if the answer would put you in danger." That shut her up. He moved toward her, and she instinctively stepped back, her hip hitting the bookshelf. He noticed, and his jaw tightened. "I'm not going to hurt you, Lucia. I know. Dad." Why was she so nervous around him in daylight? Last night in the dark, with his hands on her body and his voice in her ear, she'd felt bold, fearless. Now faced with him fully clothed, and back to being the cold mafia boss. She felt like a different person. You're very intense. I am, he agreed, stopping just in front of her. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Does that scare you? A little, she admitted. Good. Fear keeps you careful. He reached past her, and she tensed, but he was just replacing the book she'd been holding. His arm brushed hers, and electricity sparked between them. But you don't need to fear me. Not anymore. Why not anymore? Because you're mine now. He said it simply, like it was an obvious fact. And I protect what's mine. Before she could process that, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read the message, and his expression hardened. I have to go out again, he said. There's a situation. What kind of situation? The kind you don't need to worry about. He was already moving toward the door, grabbing his jacket. Marco will be here in 10 minutes. Marco? Your brother? My head of security. Different Marco. He paused at the doorway. Don't leave the apartment without him. I mean it, Lucia. I'm not a prisoner. No, you're my wife, which makes you a target. His voice was hard, brooking no argument. Until everyone knows you're under my protection, you don't go anywhere alone. Understood? She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him she wasn't some delicate flower who needed protecting. But the bruise on his jaw and the tension in his shoulders told her this wasn't the time. Understood, she said quietly. Something in his expression softened. He crossed back to her in 2 strides, cupped her face and kissed her hard and possessive and far too brief. I'll be back by dinner, he said against her lips. We'll eat together. Then he was gone, leaving her standing in his office, her lips tingling and her heart racing. Marco the bodyguard arrived exactly 10 minutes later. He was built like a tank, with a shaved head and a scar running through his left eyebrow, and he looked at Lucia like she was a bomb that might go off at any moment. Mrs. Salvatore, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he could snap a person in half. I'm Marco Ricci. I'll be your primary security detail. I don't need a babysitter, Lucia said, immediately feeling childish. No, ma'am. You need a bodyguard. Different thing. He smiled, and it transformed his face from terrifying to almost friendly. Boss's orders. Where he goes, you're the most important thing in the world. So where I go, you're the most important thing in the world. That's how this works. Lucia sighed. Fine, but I need to go out. Where to? My family's restaurant. I still work there. Worked there. I need to... What? Say goodbye? Collect her things? Make sure her father hadn't burned it down in the 2 days she'd been gone? I need to check on things. Marco considered this. I'll need to call it in. Call what in? I'm just going to my family's restaurant. Ma'am, with respect, you're not just anything anymore. You're Dante Salvatore's wife. Every move you make is strategic. Every place you go is a potential threat. He pulled out his phone. I'll clear it with the boss, and if he approves, we'll go. Deal? This was insane. Her entire life was insane now. Deal, she muttered. 10 minutes and 1 terse phone call later, they were in the back of a black SUV, heading toward Brooklyn and the restaurant that had been her family's livelihood for 3 generations. Romano's Trattoria sat on a corner in Bensonhurst, its red awning faded from years of sun, the painted sign on the window showing its age. It looked exactly the same as it had her entire life, and seeing it made Lucia's chest ache with homesickness for a life that was only 2 days gone. Her mother was at the host stand when she walked in, and the relief on her face was immediate and overwhelming. Lucia, she rushed around the stand, pulling her into a crushing hug. Thank God, I was so worried. Mama, I'm fine. I texted you. A text is not the same as seeing you with my own eyes. She pulled back, examining Lucia's face like she was checking for injuries. He's treating you well? You look tired. Are you eating? Sleeping? I'm fine, Lucia repeated, very aware of Marco standing by the door like a sentinel. Really, the apartment is beautiful. Dante is... he's fine. Her mother's eyes narrowed. Fine? That's all? What do you want me to say? I want you to say you're happy, or at least not miserable. Lucia opened her mouth, then closed it. How did she explain the confusion of the last 48 hours? The way Dante could make her feel like the only person in the world one moment, and completely invisible the next. The way her body still hummed from his touch, but her heart wasn't sure what to do with a man who showed more emotion in bed than in any actual conversation. "I'm adjusting," she finally said. Her mother cupped her cheek. "That's all anyone can ask." Sophia appeared from the kitchen, flour in her hair and fury in her eyes. "You didn't call?" "I texted." "Not the same." She hugged Lucia fiercely, despite being covered in what looked like pizza dough. "Are you okay? Really okay?" "Really okay," Lucia promised. "Because if he's awful to you, we can what, Soph? He owns this restaurant now. He owns Dad's debt. We can't do anything." The words came out harsher than she intended, and her sister flinched. "I'm sorry," Sophia whispered. "This is all so unfair." It was, but life wasn't fair, and Lucia had learned that lesson a long time ago. Her father emerged from the back office, and the sight of him made her anger flare. He looked older, more haggard, the weight of his choices written in every line of his face. "Lucia," he said, his voice rough. "I didn't know you were coming. I still work here, don't I? Or did my new husband fire me?" "No, of course not. I just thought," he ran a hand through his graying hair. "I thought you'd want to distance yourself from all of this." "This is my family," she said quietly. "I can't distance myself from family, even when they sold her to pay their debts." She didn't say it, but it hung in the air between them anyway. The lunch shift was starting, and muscle memory took over. Lucia tied on an apron, grabbed her order pad, and fell into the familiar rhythm of taking orders, running food, charming customers. Marco watched from a corner table, looking wildly out of place among the checkered tablecloths and hanging garlic braids, but he didn't interfere. It felt normal. It felt like home. It felt like a life she didn't belong to anymore. She was refilling water glasses when her phone buzzed. "Dante, where are you?" "Lucia, the restaurant. Marco's with me." "Dante, come home." "Lucia, I just got here." "Dante, Lucia, come home now." The terseness of the messages sent a chill down her spine. Something was wrong. She found Marco, who was already standing, his phone to his ear, his expression grim. "We need to go," he said quietly. "Now. What's happening?" "Tell you in the car. Say goodbye to your family. Quick." Her mother's face paled when she saw Lucia pulling off her apron. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, Mama. I just need to go." She kissed her mother's cheek, hugged Sophia quickly. "I'll call you later." In the SUV, Marco's jaw was tight as he navigated traffic with aggressive efficiency. "What's going on?" Lucia demanded. "There was an incident at one of the boss's clubs." Marco's hands tightened on the wheel. "Someone made a move. Someone stupid." "Is Dante okay?" "He's fine. Pissed off, but fine." Marco glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "But the people who made the move, they asked about you." Lucia's blood ran cold. "What?" "They wanted to know about Dante's new wife, where you came from, where you'd be." His eyes met hers in the mirror, serious and hard. "You're leverage now, Mrs. Salvatore. And in this world, leverage is the most dangerous thing to be." The apartment felt different when they arrived, charged with tension. Dante was in the living room, his jacket discarded, his shirt partially unbuttoned, dried blood on his knuckles. Two of his brothers, Nico and the one she thought was called Luca, stood nearby, speaking in rapid Italian. They all stopped when she entered. Dante's eyes locked on her, dark and intense, and he crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with a force that knocked the breath from her lungs. "You're okay," he said into her hair. Not a question, a reassurance to himself. "I'm fine," Marco said. "Marco told you what you needed to know." He pulled back, his hands framing her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated this. Should have moved faster to make it clear you're untouchable." "Dante, what happened?" His jaw clenched. The Moretti family decided to test boundaries. They wanted to send a message. They chose the wrong fucking message. The violence in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it sent heat through her veins. "Are you hurt?" she asked, taking his hands, examining the bloodied knuckles. "No. This is blood. Not mine. Musar." "I need to make this clear," Dante said, his voice dropping low, dangerous. "To everyone that you're mine. That touching you means war." "How do you do that?" His eyes darkened with something possessive and primal. "You're going to be seen with me. Everywhere. Every meeting. Every event. Every goddamn public appearance. You're going to wear my ring, carry my name, and make it crystal fucking clear that you're not just my wife in name." "I am your wife in name," she pointed out. "You're my wife in every way that matters." His grip tightened on her face. "And after last night, you know exactly what I mean." Heat flooded her cheeks, and she was acutely aware of his brothers in the room, definitely hearing this entire conversation. Nico coughed. "We'll just be in the other room." They fled, and Lucia would have laughed if Dante wasn't looking at her like he wanted to devour her whole. "This is what you signed up for," he said quietly. "This world, these dangers, these rules, can you handle it?" She should say no, should demand he find another way to protect her that didn't involve parading her around like a trophy. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine concern beneath the possessive intensity, she realized something that terrified her. She didn't want to say no. She wanted to be his, in every way that mattered. "I can handle it," she said. Dante's control snapped. He kissed her hard, claiming her mouth like he'd claimed her body the night before, and Lucia kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "There's a family meeting tonight," he said roughly. "All the families, you're coming with me. Wear something that makes it clear you're mine." "I don't have anything like that." His smile was dark and full of promise. "You do now. Check the closet." Part 4. Rising tension. The dress hanging in the closet was a statement. Emerald green silk that would cling to every curve, with a neckline that dipped just low enough to be daring without being scandalous. The back was completely open, held together by delicate chains that would rest against her bare skin. Designer, obviously. Expensive. Definitely. And hanging next to it, a velvet box containing a diamond necklace that probably cost more than her family's restaurant. Lucia stared at them both, her heart pounding. This wasn't just about wearing a pretty dress. This was armor, war paint, a declaration to every dangerous person in Dante's world that she belonged to him. "You can do this," she told herself. "You survived last night. You survived this morning. You can survive a family meeting." Though family meeting felt like a massive understatement for what Dante had described, all 5 major families gathering in one room, each one more dangerous than the last, to discuss territory and business, and God knew what else. And she was supposed to walk in there on Dante Salvatore's arm like she belonged. "You're overthinking it," a voice said from the doorway. Lucia spun to find Nico leaning against the frame, his hands in his pockets, that ever-present smirk on his face. "I'm appropriately thinking it," she countered. "This is terrifying. It's a room full of old men arguing about money. Trust me, you're the most interesting thing that'll happen all night." He pushed off the door frame and walked into the room. Her room, she realized. The master bedroom she now shared with Dante. "My brother asked me to check on you. Make sure you have everything you need." "I need a crash course in mafia politics and a Xanax." Nico laughed. "Fresh out of Xanax. But I can help with the politics." He sat on the edge of the bed, casual as anything. "Okay, quick rundown. There are 5 families. Salvatore, that's us. We control most of Manhattan and parts of Brooklyn. The Morettas have the Bronx and some of Queens. The Castellanos have Staten Island and New Jersey. The Russos have the docks and shipping. And the Vitalas have, well, they have gambling and enough dirt on everyone to be annoying." Lucia's head was already spinning. "And they all hate each other." "Hate is a strong word. We have a mutually beneficial arrangement where we agree not to kill each other as long as everyone stays in their lane." He grinned. "Mostly. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. This world doesn't do reassuring." His expression sobered slightly. "But here's what you need to know. You're Dante's wife now. That means you're untouchable. Anyone who even looks at you wrong is declaring war on the Salvatore family. So you walk in there with your head high. You smile politely. You let Dante do all the talking, and you remember that you're the most protected person in that room. What if I mess up? Say the wrong thing? You won't. You don't know that. I know my brother. He wouldn't put you in that room if he didn't think you could handle it. Nico stood, adjusting his cuffs. Plus, between you and me, half those old bastards are terrified of their own wives. A strong woman doesn't scare them. It's familiar territory. Somehow that actually helped. Thank you, Lucia said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you survive tonight. He headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Lucia, that dress? Dante's going to lose his mind when he sees you in it. Fair warning. He left before she could respond, and Lucia looked back at the dress with new eyes. Good. Let Dante lose his mind. If she had to be paraded around like a prize, she might as well enjoy the effect it had on her inscrutable husband. 2 hours later, Lucia stood in front of the full-length mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress fit like it had been made for her body specifically, which it probably had been. The emerald silk highlighted her olive skin and dark hair, which she'd styled in loose waves that cascaded over one shoulder. The diamond necklace sparkled at her throat, catching the light with every breath. She looked expensive, dangerous, like she belonged in Dante's world. She looked like a mafia wife. The door opened behind her, and she saw Dante's reflection appear in the mirror. He froze, just stopped dead in the doorway, his eyes tracking over her from head to toe, and the naked hunger in his expression made heat pool in her belly. Caso, he breathed, then louder, turn around. Lucia turned slowly and watched his jaw clench as he took in the full effect, the dip of the neckline, the way the silk clung to her curves, the completely bare expanse of her back. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and suddenly his hands were on her waist, pulling her against him. You're trying to kill me, he growled against her ear. That's what this is, assassination by dress. Despite her nerves, Lucia smiled. You picked it. I know. His lips brushed her neck, sending shivers down her spine. I'm a masochist, because now I have to spend the entire night watching other men look at you and not being able to kill them for it. You could just not take me. His hands tightened possessively. Not a chance in hell. You're coming with me. You're sitting next to me, and every person in that room is going to know exactly who you belong to. He turned her in his arms, and God, he looked good. Black suit tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders, black shirt open at the collar, no tie. He looked dangerous and powerful, and completely in control, except for the way he was looking at her, like she was the only thing in the world that could shake that control. We should go, he said, his voice rough. Before I decide to say fuck the meeting and keep you in this bedroom for the rest of the night. Would that be so bad? Yes, because then the Morettis would think they scared me off, and I don't scare. He released her, stepping back, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. But later, Mowgli, later I'm peeling that dress off you myself. Promises like that should not make her knees weak. But they did. The meeting was held at an exclusive club in Midtown, the kind of place that didn't have a sign and required a password just to get past the door. Marco and 2 other security guards flanked them as they entered, and Lucia felt every eye in the room turn toward them. The main room was all dark wood and leather, cigar smoke hanging in the air, crystal glasses of expensive liquor on every surface. Men in expensive suits clustered in groups, their conversations dying as Dante entered with Lucia on his arm. She felt like a specimen under a microscope. Dante's hand settled on the small of her bare back, possessive, protective, a clear signal to everyone watching. Salvatore, a booming voice cut through the silence. A large man with silver hair and a jovial smile approached, arms spread wide, and this must be the bride we've heard so much about. Castellano, Dante greeted him, his tone neutral. This is my wife, Lucia. Lucia extended her hand and Castellano took it, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that lasted just a second too long. She felt Dante tense beside her. A pleasure, my dear. Welcome to the family, so to speak. Castellano's eyes were sharp despite his friendly demeanor. You're much more beautiful than the rumors suggested. Dante is a lucky man. Thank you, Lucia said, proud of how steady her voice was. Other men approached, the heads of the other families, each one sizing her up, offering congratulations that felt more like evaluations. She smiled, shook hands, made polite small talk, all while acutely aware of Dante's hand never leaving her back. Then the Morettis arrived. Lucia felt Dante go rigid the moment they entered. The head of the family, Giovanni Moretti, was younger than the others, maybe late 40s, with slicked back dark hair and eyes like a shark. And next to him, a younger man who had to be his son, with the same predatory stare. Salvatore, Giovanni said, his voice cold. I see you brought your new acquisition. Acquisition, like she was a car he'd purchased. My wife, Dante corrected, his voice dangerously soft. You'll address her with respect, or you'll address me outside. The room went silent. Even the music from the speakers seemed to quiet. Giovanni's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, my apologies, Mrs. Salvatore. I meant no disrespect. Liar, he'd meant exactly that. None taken, Lucia said smoothly, meeting his gaze. I'm sure you understand how protective husbands can be. Something flickered in Giovanni's expression, surprise maybe that she'd spoken at all. His son, however, was staring at her with undisguised interest that made her skin crawl. Dante stepped slightly in front of her, blocking the younger Moretti's view. We should take our seats. I'm sure everyone wants to get started. The conference room was dominated by a massive table. Dante pulled out a chair for her, the only woman in the room, positioning her directly next to him at the head of the table. A power move. Every other family head sat with their advisors and guards, but Dante had brought his wife. The message was clear. Lucia wasn't a weakness. She was a statement. The meeting began with discussions of territory, shipping routes, and business ventures that Lucia only half understood. She stayed quiet, observing, noting the way power dynamics shifted with every word. But she also noticed the way the younger Moretti, Antonio, she heard him called, kept looking at her, not subtle glances, open staring. Dante noticed too. His hand found her thigh under the table, possessive and warm through the silk of her dress. The matter of the Brooklyn docks needs to be settled, Giovanni was saying. The Russos can't manage them effectively. Perhaps the territory should be redistributed. The Russos are managing fine, Dante said, his voice cutting through the room. This sounds like you're fishing for territory that isn't yours, Moretti. I'm simply suggesting. Suggest something else. The tension ratcheted up another notch. Antonio leaned forward, that unsettling smile on his face. Perhaps we should discuss more pleasant topics, like your wedding, Salvatore. Very sudden, wasn't it? One might wonder what inspired such urgency. Lucia felt Dante's hand tighten on her thigh. One might mind their own business, Dante said softly. I'm simply curious about the arrangement. After all, arranged marriages are so old-fashioned, unless, of course, there was a debt involved. Antonio's eyes slid to Lucia. What was your family's business again, Mrs. Salvatore? He knew. Of course he knew. Everyone probably knew that her father had gambled away their restaurant and Dante had demanded her as payment. Before Dante could respond, before he could lose his temper and start a war right here in this conference room, Lucia spoke up. My family owns Romano's Trattoria in Bensonhurst, she said clearly. And yes, our marriage was arranged, but not because I was sold like property. She met Antonio's gaze directly. Dante could have taken our restaurant, destroyed my family, and walked away. Instead, he chose a partnership, a union that benefits both families. That's called smart business, Mr. Moretti. Perhaps you should try it sometime. The room went dead silent. Antonio's face flushed red. Giovanni's expression was unreadable, and Dante's hand on her thigh squeezed. Whether in warning or approval, she couldn't tell. Then Castellano started laughing. A big booming laugh that broke the tension. She's got fire, Salvatore. I like her. He raised his glass. To Mrs. Salvatore. May she keep our meetings interesting. The other family heads, except the Morettis, raised their glasses as well. Lucia let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The rest of the meeting passed without incident, though Antonio continued to glare at her like she'd personally insulted his entire bloodline, which she supposed she kind of had. When it finally ended and they were back in the SUV heading home, Lucia expected Dante to be angry. She'd spoken out of turn, drew attention to herself, potentially made things worse. Instead, he pulled her into his lap. "That," he said, his voice rough with something that sounded like pride, "was the sexiest thing I've ever seen. I probably shouldn't have." "You were perfect." He kissed her hard, his hands tangling in her hair. "Absolutely fucking perfect. Did you see Moretti's face? I thought he was going to have a stroke. He's going to hate me now. He already hated you. Now he also fears you. That's better." Dante's hands slid down her back, tracing the chains of her dress. "You held your own in a room full of dangerous men. You didn't flinch, didn't back down." "I was terrified. I know. I could feel you shaking. But you did it anyway." His eyes met hers, dark and intense. "Do you understand what you are now, Lucia? You're not just my wife. You're my equal, my partner." Her heart stuttered. "Dante, I married you to settle a debt, but keeping you," he cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbones. "That's the smartest decision I've ever made." Then he was kissing her again, and Lucia kissed him back with everything she had, her hands fisting in his jacket, her body melting against his. By the time they reached the penthouse, they were both breathing hard, and Dante carried her straight to the bedroom, kicking the door shut behind them. "I meant what I said earlier," he growled, setting her on her feet and spinning her around. "I'm taking this dress off myself." His fingers found the delicate chains holding the dress together, and with agonizing slowness, he unfastened them one by one. The silk slithered down her body and pooled at her feet, leaving her standing in just the diamond necklace and the ridiculously expensive lingerie that had also appeared in her closet. Dante's sharp intake of breath was gratifying. "Dio," he breathed. "You're trying to kill me. You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." His hands skimmed up her sides, and she shivered. "Every time I look at you, I forget how to breathe. Every time you speak, I want to kiss you until you forget your own name. Every time you challenge me, I want to bend you over the nearest surface and remind you exactly who you belong to." Heat flooded through her. "What's stopping you?" His control snapped. He spun her around and kissed her with bruising intensity, his hands everywhere, and Lucia met him kiss for kiss, touch for touch. Last night had been about discovery, about learning each other's bodies. Tonight was different. Tonight was raw and desperate and consuming. He walked her backward until her legs hit the bed, and then she was falling and he was following her down, his weight pressing her into the mattress in the best way possible. "Mine," he growled against her throat. "Say it." "Yours," she gasped, as his mouth moved lower, trailing fire across her skin. "Dante, please." "Please what, Mowgli? Please don't stop." He smiled against her skin, a real smile. She could feel it. Never. And he didn't. Later, much later, Lucia lay boneless and satisfied in Dante's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, and for the first time since this insane marriage had begun, she felt peaceful, like maybe this could actually work. "You surprised me tonight," Dante said quietly into the darkness. "By talking back to a mobster, by being brave when you didn't have to be, by standing up for yourself, for us." His arms tightened around her. "I knew you were strong, but I didn't know you were fearless." "I'm not fearless. I'm terrified most of the time. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You're going to be incredible at this." "At what? Being a mafia wife?" "At being my wife." Lucia's chest tightened with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. She'd gone into this marriage expecting cold distance, business arrangements, separate lives that occasionally intersected. She hadn't expected this. This heat, this intensity, this feeling like she was standing on the edge of something huge and terrifying and wonderful. "Dante," she said quietly. What happens now?" Now you sleep. Tomorrow, you meet with my mother. Lucia's eyes flew open. What? She felt him smile. Welcome to the family, Mowgli. The real initiation starts tomorrow. Oh God. She was going to need more than one dress for this.